Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to TurboTenant's August webinar. Of course, we are discussing Section 8 housing today. We're going to walk you through the process, pros and cons. At the very top, just want to make a couple of notes for you here. We are going to record this webinar and email it out to you after the presentation. So check your inboxes tomorrow. You will receive a copy of the video and also a copy of the deck, which is really useful because we have links in there to help you pursue this program if you're interested. Something that I think is really important to note when we're talking about Section 8, it is important to be mindful about the stigmatization, right? So there has been a stigma around Section 8 housing, and unfortunately, some people use the term Section 8 as an insult. We are not going to be doing that here. We will not tolerate that here. We are simply talking about this as an affordable housing program, and our only goal is to provide you with education and resources so you can make an informed decision about whether or not you want to participate in your local program. Beyond that, it's important to note at the front, and we'll touch on it just shortly, we're going to use the terms Section 8 housing program and Housing Choice Voucher program interchangeably. They are going to mean the same thing. Some states have really strayed away from saying Section 8. Some still have it everywhere. So just so you know, the terms are synonymous and everything should be good to go. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We will have a discussion period at the very end of the presentation, during which time our esteemed panelists are going to hop on and offer their expertise. So I will introduce them formally later, but just know that you're not going to want to miss out on what they have to say. With that, my name is Krista Ruther. I am the Senior Content Marketing Writer here at TurboTenant, and I am joined today by my fantastic boss, Jonathan Forche. Jonathan, would you like to tell the people what you do?
Absolutely. I'm the Director of Education and Community here at TurboTenant. If you are not already using TurboTenant, you should. Quick plug, we are your all-in-one landlord software solution. So for everything from marketing your rental to finding tenants, running screening reports, and accepting rent payments, you can use us. But we won't bash you over the head with TurboTenant ads. We are here to talk about Section 8 housing.
It's true. So here's what we're going to go over today. We're going to explain the basics of the program, the history, the eligibility and demographics on both sides in terms of participants, the benefits and drawbacks for landlords specifically, and then we're going to go into some frequently asked questions before we open the floor to our discussion.
Excellent.
So to start us off, we have a poll. How many tenants do you think participate in the Section 8 housing program nationally? Let us know by selecting an answer here. I would say there are no wrong answers, but as it turns out, there are 3 in this case. So just take your best guess.
Yeah, pressure's on now to find the right answer. All of you should be seeing a poll on your screen right now. I see many of you are pouring in with your answers. Ooh, there's clearly a loser right now as far as the answers are going. This is interesting.
Right, and a tie. I'm very excited to show you guys these results.
All right, we will let this run for about 20 more seconds. So if you haven't answered, please do.
Absolutely.
10 more seconds.
All right, getting down to the wire. If you want to participate, now is the time to click.
All right, and I'm going to end the poll. Let me share these results with everyone. Okay, so 7% of you thought it was 450,000. Julio in the chat just said has to be 2.2, too specific.
You got me, Julio.
Julio, you are a wise man. Yes, it is. It's 2.2 million. So it's interesting to see 2.2, 3 million, and 10 million were all pretty close guesstimates. So 2.2 million people, tenants that is, participate in the Section 8 housing program nationally, though around 5.2 million American households received rental assistance as of 2018.
Great stat.
Okay, so now you understand sort of the number of tenants that you could potentially reach with Section 8 housing. Now let's talk about what it is. Krista, could you take us? There
I
we go.
will. There we go. Here are the basics of the Section 8 housing program.
Okay, so what is the Section 8 housing program? Well, this is essentially affordable housing. It is the government's affordable housing program. And as Krista said earlier, it is also known as the Housing Choice Voucher program. So this is sponsored by the government. Specifically, it's run by the Department of Housing and Urban Development, which is the acronym HUD, H-U-D. So you will surely hear us say HUD throughout this presentation. That is who we're referring to. And it provides subsidized rental units to low-income individuals and families, seniors, and disabled individuals. It's funded by the government and administered by local public housing agencies. And PHAs is that acronym. You will also hear us say that. I apologize for all the acronyms. I blame government bureaucracy. It's not our choice to create a million new acronyms for you to know. But essentially, it is affordable housing for low income or otherwise qualifying people.
Absolutely. Something that I think is important to note, just general broad strokes of the program participants. So more than 80% of households participating in Section 8 subsidized housing earn less than $20,000 per year. 43% of families in Section 8 housing have children, which is the same percentage of Section 8 households with at least one disabled family member. And hundreds of thousands of Americans are on a waiting list to receive this housing aid. We'll talk about that a little bit more later.
Okay, so the history of Section 8 housing. It was, as you may guess, the name Section 8 comes from the actual legislation that created it. So it comes from Section 8 of the United States Housing Act of 1937. But the program, the original program of Section 8 was actually established in 1974 as part of the Housing and Community Development Act. And at that time, it consisted of three parts. We had new construction, substantial rehabilitation, and existing housing certificates. As legislation tends to do, it's changed a lot since then. So in 1983, the new construction and substantial rehabilitation program portions of the program were repealed and Section 8 vouchers were added. And then in 1998, existing housing certificates were merged with and converted to vouchers. And that is, of course, why it's also called the Housing Voucher Program.
Very true.
Okay, so how does it work? Sort of broad strokes here. Basically how it works is prospective voucher holders apply for the program through PHA, which is their public housing authority. And the government will run a background check, employment verification to make sure that this person applying for the program actually meets the criteria. And if the PHA is unable to assist immediately, they will put them on a waiting list. And so about that waiting list, as you may imagine with government programs, the waiting list is very long and sometimes can move very slowly. I will say up top here that Section 8, there are federal rules for it, but it does vary quite a bit by state and sometimes even by city. So we're talking how it works in most places, but if you are interested after this, we definitely encourage you to reach out to your local housing authorities and talk with them about specifics for your area. So about that waiting list, the waiting list can also vary by state, but it's very long. And Krista, I believe you have some stats on that.
I do. So according to the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, among the 50 largest housing agencies, only 2 have average wait times of under a year for families that have made it off of the waiting list. The longest have average wait times of up to 8 years. On average nationally, families that received vouchers spent close to 2.5 years on wait lists first, which is an incredible amount of time to need housing.
Yes, that's a very long time. And people are only added to the waiting list after they have met those other criteria that we've talked about. So these are people who need housing, in some cases, or actually most cases, are very limited on their housing options because they're low income. So unfortunately, they're sitting on a waiting list, sometimes for up to 8 years. Yeah. So important to keep that in mind as the landlord, and especially if you are yourself providing Section 8 housing or thinking about it, it's important to put yourself in the shoes of your tenants and remember that they may have been waiting a very long time to get into a Section 8 house.
That's true.
So once their day does come and their name hits the top of that waiting list, they are given a housing voucher. And with that voucher, they can then apply for properties that accept housing vouchers. So you as a landlord, that could be you. You could put your property up as Section 8 eligible. We'll get to that in a minute, what that exactly means. But the way that this works then for the tenant, say a Section 8 tenant moves into your housing, they would pay 30% of their household income toward your monthly rent, including utilities. And then the rest of it, 70%, comes from the public housing authority. So in this case, that's the government. 70% of it will come from the government.
Very true. So that means, just to put it in layman's terms, you are guaranteed that 70% of rent. And you cannot qualify as a tenant for Section 8 housing if you are not able to meet the income requirements insofar as paying your 30%. But we'll talk more about the benefits of joining later. For now, let's talk a little bit about the housing eligibility requirements to join this program and the demographics. So, as I mentioned, there are definite requirements on both sides. We're going to talk about renters first. As we've mentioned, these requirements are going to vary based on locations, because any aspect of the rental industry that isn't nationally run is going to have individualized rules, which is why we're going to stress so much in this presentation that you check in with your local PHA for more information tailored to your state and city. Especially because each PHA can set their own requirements both for renters and landlords, excuse me. That being said, there are 4 common factors that your local PHA likely uses to determine renters' eligibility according to section8housing.org. So first is going to be the income level. On average, a household's income level must be less than 50% of the local median income of the area to be considered low income. Extremely low income folks are going to have an income level that is less than 30% of the local median income level of the area. The income limits are adjusted based on the location of the housing agency and the number of members there are in the household. So if you have a very big family and you're somewhere that's very expensive, such as San Francisco, your requirements are going to look a lot different than a single person in Ohio. Another factor to consider building off of that point is the family size and composition. So families with more members will have a higher limit on their household income for eligibility because there are more folks presumably earning an income. If there is an elderly family member or a family member with a disability, those situations increase the likelihood that the family will qualify for the program. Additionally, your citizenship status is going to be examined if you apply to be a renter with Section 8. Only citizens and certain legal immigrants are qualified to apply. They're also going to take a look at your background and specifically your previous evictions. So households that have been repeatedly evicted from their housing have a higher risk of future evictions in some cases and can therefore be denied housing assistance. Though the waiting list is long, certain priority cases are given preference. So that's usually reserved for people who are homeless or living in substandard housing. They pay over half of their income to rent, or they've been involuntarily displaced. Alternatively, and sadly, victims of child abuse and domestic violence often need these programs, so those cases are prioritized as well. And I did see a quick question in the chat about why there's a stigma with Section 8 housing. Unfortunately, it boils down to low-income folks and really the stigma around taking care of people who are low income. So we can touch on that more in the discussion portion, but I just wanted to call that out while we talk about the housing eligibility requirements for the renter side. That being said, there are, of course, disqualifiers too. These are going to vary as well, but commonly if you have a history of evictions, specifically from subsidized housing programs, and especially for serious lease violations, you're unlikely to get a housing choice voucher. Also, if you engage in the use or production of illicit drugs or otherwise show a history of abuse of alcohol or illegal drugs that can threaten the health and safety of other residents, you are not likely to qualify for the program. In fact, you won't. Equally, if you do not have any source of income, as I mentioned earlier, you will not qualify because you are still expected to pay 30% of the monthly fees attached to your housing as a tenant of Section 8. All that being said, the PHA has to provide a reason for denying a Section 8 applicant, so households have the option to file an application appeal if any of the circumstances that led to their denial have changed. That being said, look at this beautiful graph. Shout out to our designer, Frankie. She's amazing. But largely, this is the breakdown of Section 8 tenants according to HUD. So most Housing Choice Voucher Program participants are single people at 45.5%. Then we have elderly people, which is defined here as being over 62. And the final category are non-elderly disabled people. So usually that's a disability that it exists for life. It's something documented, something that you cannot heal from or cure from. So that being said, it may strike you as odd that we've included this slide, but when we asked for questions regarding Section 8 housing, what we saw come up often was this idea of wanting to reject Section 8 applicants. If that is how you feel, really glad you're here to learn more about the program. I would encourage you to reflect on why you want to reject them outright. Because again, it goes back to the stigma of taking care of lower income folks. And I really do encourage you to sit down and ask yourself why you don't want this broad swath of people to apply for your unit. That being said, if you are someone who doesn't like to engage in bureaucracy, or we'll touch on this later, but oftentimes the first month rent gets delayed by about 2 months. If that wouldn't work for your business, these are ways that you can effectively reject Section 8 applicants without getting in trouble, because there are some states and cities where you are barred from discriminating based on source of income or public assistance, meaning you cannot reject Section 8 applicants outright. You cannot write in your listing and say no Section 8 allowed. Otherwise, you will get in trouble. That being said, you do not have to accept all applicants. One of the most crucial points of this program is that you as the landlord have the opportunity to screen these tenants as you would for any other applicant. All you have to do then is stay consistent in terms of what your criteria is. So if you are looking for a specific income level or a certain credit score, having those standards in place will allow you to review a Section 8 application and turn it away if it doesn't meet those standards. And that works well if you live in one of these places with rules barring you from denying Section 8 applicants. Also, very important to note, do not make screening harder or costlier for Section 8 applicants, because you will run the risk of violating fair housing laws. So biggest piece of advice, stay consistent and really just focus on finding the best tenant for your property. So use tenant screening like what we offer at TurboTenant to validate that the person you are looking at to rent your unit is someone you want in there based on their background. If you are in, go ahead.
I'm so sorry. The screening of your tenants cannot be overstated. It is important whether you're renting to Section 8 tenants or non-Section 8 tenants. Screening your tenant and knowing exactly who you're getting in there is very, very crucial. I think some people think that Section 8 tenants cannot be screened like you would any other tenant. That's actually not true. Mm-hmm. And we would recommend that you do screen them just as you would anyone else. And that includes credit check, criminal background, if your area allows it, and eviction history. Mm-hmm. The PHA, as part of the 8 program, will do their own background check, but it totally makes sense to just go through it the exact same way that you would for any other applicant.
Exactly. That's a great addition, particularly because if there are things in their background that you wouldn't accept from a non-Section 8 tenant, you don't have to accept them. There is not any government rule that says that you have to accept all Section 8 applicants. So just bear that in mind. That was a big misconception that we kept running into. Also, if you live in a state that doesn't require you to accept applications from Section 8, it's even easier to not accept applications, because you just have to avoid submitting your property for program approval. And then again, just maintain specific tenant criteria that you apply to everyone. So another example of something you can't do, you cannot tell a Section 8 applicant that the rent is going to be higher than what it is, or falsely inflate it so that it's beyond the fair market value, which is what the PHA looks at to determine if they're going to pay the subsidy. So keep it consistent, treat them as you would any other tenant. Screening is crucial. If you don't want these folks in your rental unit for whatever reason, well, actually, specifically for the reasons of bureaucracy or it wouldn't fit with your business model, these are our recommendations. If it's any other reason, again, I really challenge you to sit with yourself and work out why. Moving right along here, let's talk about the property types. So, oh wait, it might have skipped on me. Did it?
No, you're good. Yeah.
I am doing great. Okay, so actually, let's see here. There we go. So as a landlord, in order to be eligible for this program, your property is going to have to go through specific steps and inspections, which we'll touch on later. But by and large, you have to be committed to providing decent, safe, and sanitary housing. That means agreeing by the program's rules and passing both the initial inspection and annual inspections thereafter to ensure that you're providing a safe and sanitary space for people to live. Sounds pretty straightforward, right? In terms of property types, Bankrate lists the following as the most common options for Section 8 housing. So you'll see single family homes, condos, multifamily apartment buildings, single rooms in a house or apartment building, group homes, mobile homes, everything you can think of. It's very likely that you can apply to be a Section 8 landlord with that property type. So it's great. It means the program is flexible, and regardless of what property is in your portfolio, you could likely find something that would work really well for Section 8.
And with that, another poll.
Woohoo!
Okay, this time we are asking, what type of property is most commonly rented in Section 8 programs? All of you should see a pop-up with this poll question. Please make your best guess.
I will say close readers of our emails already know one option that is not the answer.
What a great time to plug our weekly newsletter, which is called The Key.
Yes, it is. That is a newsletter we write every week. It has fun stats and interesting articles, both from TurboTenant and yours truly, and external trends, topics, and other tricks that you should know as a landlord to boost your business. So if you haven't subscribed, highly recommend it. I am a little biased because I write it, but I think it's chock full of good information that you could use.
Completely agree. I'm also extremely biased, but you can sign up at turbotenant.com/blog. Check that out. Okay, I'm going to let this go for just a few more seconds here. We've got most people in. Timothy, if wrong, I want to guess again. Oh, I'm so sorry. The poll doesn't give us that option. I believe in you, though. I think you answered right. All right, we'll give it just a few more seconds. Okay, going to end it. And now I will share the results with everyone. Okay, so what type of property is most commonly rented in Section 8 programs? 10% of you said manufactured homes, 17% said high-rise buildings, 24% low-rise. Okay, it looks like the winner was fully detached single-family homes. And the 30% who answered that are correct.
You guys are so smart. Look at you go. That is true. So most Section 8 tenants live in single-family detached homes. If you take a look at this breakdown on screen, you can see how it shakes out with these different property types. But again, even if you are just renting out a single room, that is an option under Section 8. So very flexible program that many landlords could participate in should they wish. All right. So here's another exciting tidbit, which is how do you join? What can you do? It's a bit of a process, but we will walk you through each step. So to become a Section 8 landlord, first and foremost, you are going to want to contact your local PHA. The PHA will provide you with details on their specific process tailored to your location and also provide you some methods of posting your vacant units. The PHA may also share specific websites or platforms that they use to advertise available rental units. And that can be really important because, again, you're trying to help these people get housing as soon as possible while maintaining your due diligence. I will say that you can also use something like TurboTenant to market your properties. And by including something like Section 8 vouchers welcome or Section 8 tenants apply, you will be opening the door and letting those folks know that you're accepting their applications. Once you have your listing up, you can select a tenant based on your own rental criteria. They might also come to you, and then in which case you would screen them and make sure that they pass your specific standards for tenants. You'll then have them fill out, you will fill out their request for tenancy approval form. This is a form from the PHA, basically walking through the property details, how much you charge for rent, etc. Because the PHA has to determine that your proposed rent is reasonable compared to similar units in the marketplace. So they're basically assessing the fair market rent in your area. And they want to make sure that your rent isn't higher than the rent paid, that you're pitching for this tenant isn't higher than rent paid by other tenants on the premises. Basically, are you trying to take advantage of the program? If so, they will not let you in the program. Next step is going to be the inspection. So as we mentioned earlier, there is an initial inspection when you're joining Section 8, and then you will receive inspections yearly or every 2 years after that point. It has to be a specific inspector who can conduct a housing quality standards inspection, or HQS, another fun acronym for you. They are going to require that you meet your property meets 13 specific standards regarding various areas of the house. So they want to take a look at things like sanitary facilities, your food preparation and refuse disposal areas, space and security. I won't read this whole list to you because I think you would get bored of me, but just bear in mind they're going to be looking through the entire thing and inherently making sure that it's safe, sanitary, and secure for tenants to live there. Couple things to note that are very important. Your inspector will tell you if there are any deficiencies that would bar you from passing your inspection. There are two types of deficiencies: non-life-threatening deficiencies. Think about like doors not latching all the way, or a broken window that's boarded up. And then there are life-threatening deficiencies. A roof is breaking, the sewage line runs into your water line, things that are not safe or sanitary. If you have a non-life-threatening deficiency, you have 30 days to repair that. If it's a life-threatening deficiency, you have 24 hours to make that repair. After both scenarios, you're going to need to redo the inspection. And we've included some resources here to show you the inspection flow chart should you fail again. It details some of the timelines and some of the unique situations that can come off of that. One last note on these standards. Different property types are going to have different additional requirements and inspection procedures. So these 13 are going to apply across the board, particularly for single family and multifamily houses. But if you are renting out something like a single room, there are going to be additional requirements. So for example, with a single room, they're going to make sure that the tenant would have access to the single room without having to walk through anybody else's living area, that there are adequate fire exits, things of that nature. So manufactured homes, congregate housing, single room occupancy, shared housing, and group residence, you can expect an additional set of requirements.
And I see a few people in the chat asking who pays for this inspection. That is part of the Section 8 program. So the PHA will send the inspector.
Mm-hmm. Good question. All right. But once all of that is done, your house or your property has passed, then you can sign the lease with your tenant, and you'll also sign a housing assistance payment contract, which dictates what percentage of the rent will be paid by the tenant versus the program. Remember, that's a 30-70 split. And then you will start receiving payments. Now, you'll note here, I put a little asterisk. We will discuss this shortly. I've alluded to it, but your first payment is likely to be delayed. Bureaucracy, am I right? Okay, so now let's talk about the benefits of participating in Section 8 housing as a landlord. First off, you're going to earn a steady income stream because unlike tenants from the private market, you know that you're guaranteed to receive at least a portion of the rent owed to you each month via the housing subsidy. You're also going to enjoy reduced vacancy rates because once your tenant moves out, as we mentioned with that wait list, there are hundreds of thousands of people waiting to move in nationally, right? So that means someone is going to be eager to get in there and is likely to contact you faster than you might see on the private market. Additionally, voucher holders have undergone screening to qualify for the program. Again, can't stress this enough. You should still do your own screening, but knowing that they've at least passed the first round of screening can make you feel even more secure in the results that you get from TurboTenant or whatever tenant screening tool you use. Lastly, helping people in need is so huge. Like we said, people have to wait for a significant amount of time to secure affordable housing. And it can be really heartbreaking. There have been stories of people who have been on waiting lists for an exorbitant amount of time. And that's really painful. Not having a secure place to live causes a myriad of problems, psychological, physical, health-wise. Like there's so much that gets packed into not having somewhere safe to call home. So by participating in this program, you are helping people achieve that safety, which I think is really fantastic. That said, I want to paint you the full picture. Again, our purpose today is to provide you the resources and education you need to make the choice for yourself. I'm not here to convince you to join Section 8 if it wouldn't work for your situation. So let's talk about the drawbacks. You are going to be required to meet standards set by HUD's Real Estate Assessment Group, so REAC. Those are the inspectors, the specialized inspectors, and only these folks can qualify your property as being good for the program. If your property doesn't pass that inspection, either initially or as the years go on, you will be asked to perform additional maintenance and try again. Additionally, on average, the first payment with a new Section 8 tenant is delayed by about 2 months. As such, it's highly recommended to have enough money available to pay your mortgage or any other operating expenses for the first few months if you are accepting a Section 8 tenant for the first time. Lastly, you're going to be limited when it comes to increasing your rent. Because Section 8 housing vouchers are paid out based on the annual fair market rent in your area, you can't increase rent beyond that established rate, or otherwise you will not qualify for the program. That being said, there are a couple of situations in which you could revisit the amount of rent being paid. You'd have to talk to your PHA. Typically, these leases are at least a year long. So I would expect you stay at one rate for the year. But if you do something like an overhaul of some amenities, you increase the value of your property compared to similar properties in the area. Or if the properties in your area see an uptick in local rent prices, then you can increase your rate to match that. But just remember, you're looking to provide value for these people, and it's not necessarily going to be a case where you can just jump in and charge whatever you'd like. So keep that in mind. All right.
Okay, now getting into some FAQs. The chat has been popping off. So a lot of people have been asking questions that we are about to get to. So stay with us for a few minutes longer here. We will start to get into some of these questions. Okay, so first up, can landlords charge HCV tenants the same amount as non-HCV tenants if the proposed rent is reasonable and isn't higher than other units in the area with similar amenities? The answer is yes. I think that this is a common misconception with Section 8 housing, is that you have to charge less than market value. That is not true. So landlords can charge full rent no matter who the tenant is, whether they're Section 8, whether they're not Section 8, or HCV, non-HCV. So if you make substantial upgrades on the fair market rent for your area, if you make substantial upgrades or the fair market rate for your area increases, then you can increase the monthly rent charged with PHA approval. That goes back to what Krista just said, that it is done on an annual basis. So these last few years, as we've seen rent prices skyrocket in a lot of cities, you could only do that annually, likely. And I say likely because, again, so much of this depends on your local PHA, your state regulations, your city regulations. There are going to be very vast differences. But in this case, yes, you can charge full rent.
Absolutely.
Okay, number 2, how does a security deposit work within the Section 8 program? So you can charge a Section 8 tenant the maximum deposit that your state allows, just as you would with any other tenant. And as with any rental unit, we recommend that you charge the maximum amount that your state allows. The reason for that is not to, put somebody in even worse financial situations than they already are. It's to cover you. Hopefully, if everything goes well and your screening process has worked out and your tenant is amazing, then at the end of the lease term, they'll get that money back anyway. The idea is not to charge an exorbitant security deposit and get rich off their security deposit. That's not at all how the security deposit should work. We include a link here that has a chart that will show you every state, including your own, and what your state's rules are about security deposits. Many states allow a month, many states allow a security deposit maximum to be the equivalent of 1 month's rent. Some states allow a month and a half, some states allow 2 months, some actually don't have any limit. So that will be determined by your PHA, what is reasonable. This Section 8 voucher does not cover security deposits. So we've already talked about the fact that the monthly rent, 70% of it is covered by the Section 8 voucher. That is not the case with the security deposit. So your Section 8 tenant, in this case, would be the one paying that security deposit. If they are unable to, there are other housing assistance programs that can help them pay that. But that is something to keep in mind. And the amount, when I say equal to a month of rent, I want to clarify that that means the entire amount of rent. So, for example, in a state that allows a maximum security deposit equal to 1 month's rent, let's say the unit goes for $1,000 a month, and the renter, being a Section 8 voucher holder, only pays $300 a month. The security deposit may still be up to $1,000, that full month of rent. And a few people asking if we can drop that link. Let me get that. There you go. I just put that in the chat.
And just as a reminder, when we send out the recording to you, you will also get a copy of this deck, so you don't have to scramble and try and click the link now if you don't want to.
Okay, another very frequently asked question. What recourse do I have if there is damage to my property? Well, you can withhold the security deposit just as you can with any other kind of renter that is ever in your unit. That could lead to the PHA asking the renter to pay for repairs if there are damages that go beyond the security deposit. And then if the renter refuses, then their housing voucher may be terminated. Now, for you, the landlord, you may be thinking, okay, well, that doesn't really help me. But that is a pretty serious bad thing to happen to this voucher holder. If they don't have a voucher, they can no longer participate in Section 8 housing. And if they are disabled or low income, then that may be kind of their only option for finding affordable housing in their area. So Section 8 does include a provision that if a tenant causes more than $500 in damage to the property, the landlord can file a claim in small claims court against the tenant, and you may be able to access a mitigation fund for monetary assistance. Big asterisk on that last part. Obviously, it is contingent on your state and city rules. Yes, I'm saying it again. Seriously, look into your local laws for specifics on these kinds of issues. So the example that we have here is, say that a unit goes for $900 a month in rent. Say you charged a security deposit of $500. The tenant causes $1,000 in damages. So obviously they cause more monetary value and damages than you have in their security deposit. So HUD will pay damages up to $400, which is the rent minus the security deposit. So that's our note down here in the corner that says the claim amount caused by a Section 8 tenant cannot exceed the monthly rent amount less the security deposit. So I know this may give you pause as a landlord, that obviously you don't want to invite people in who are going to cause a lot of damage. Of course you don't. And that is why, once again, we would say that you should absolutely screen your tenants, be they Section 8 or otherwise. You need to know who these people are, where they've been, what they've done to some extent. We recommend inspecting the inside and outside of your Section 8 property frequently. That being said, don't just barge in. Obviously, let your tenant know that you intend to come by. It's also a good opportunity for them to let you know if there are any issues with the property that you could hopefully fix. That gives you the opportunity to catch small problems before they become really big problems. If something, say there's a dripping faucet. Well, you can catch it while it's still just a dripping faucet before it turns into, I don't know, water damage in your walls, for instance. Also, be sure to charge late fees and stick to the terms and conditions of your lease. That is something else we cannot overstress, is make sure that your lease is well written and make sure that everyone, you and your tenants, understand every part of it. Your tenant potentially losing their voucher is a very big deal. So they will not want to lose their voucher.
Yes.
Again, going back to that misconception of who Section 8 tenants are, they're not trying to just get a free ride. They are typically down on their luck, they are low income, and they want to cooperate with you.
Well said.
So that actually dovetails pretty nicely into this next one. Aren't HCV tenants problem tenants? No, they are not. HCV tenants are typically long-term renters. On average, they live in a rental unit for 7 to 8 years. So that is definitely another pro of this program, is that if you get an HCV tenant into your unit and they're great and they pay on time and everything is going well, that could be 8 years that you could have them happily renting your unit. That's 8 years that you wouldn't have to look for other tenants. So there are no documented statistics proving that HCV renters are any more likely to damage a unit or to not pay their rent than their non-HCV peers. But once again, make sure you're screening your tenants. I saw somebody ask how you get a criminal history check in the chat. It's a great time to plug TurboTenant screening reports. TurboTenant screening reports, we use TransUnion for all of our screening reports. And so that includes a credit check, a criminal history, and an eviction history. The criminal history and the eviction history, it may not be allowed in your area. And if that's the case, it would not include that. But it is a very thorough background check, show you exactly who you are potentially renting to. And yes, I saw somebody ask what HCV is. Apologies for using the acronyms. Housing Choice Voucher Program. So it is essentially interchangeable with Section 8. It is the same program.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now evictions. This one's always hot too. So frequently asked question, isn't it impossible to evict a Section 8 tenant for lease violations? No, it is not. You can absolutely evict them if you have grounds for eviction. So I want to stress that again, because these are not problem tenants. If you are providing Section 8 housing, you should not go into it thinking, we're going to have to go to an eviction proceeding. No, you never want to go to an eviction proceeding. Eviction proceedings are horrible for both sides. I'm sure there are people on the call right now who have gone through an eviction proceeding and can attest to the fact that it's bad for both sides. Nobody wins really in an eviction proceeding. It's just trying to make a horrible situation slightly better. So tenants with the Section 8 voucher don't have any additional protections against evictions, and they're held to the lease agreement terms and conditions just as any other tenant would be. If you do have cause to evict a Section 8 tenant, you have to notify the PHA, which is Public Housing Agency, again, and also the tenant anywhere from 60 to 90 days prior to the actual eviction. This is very similar to a normal eviction proceeding. The only difference is you have to include the PHA and all of your notifications. And important note here, if your tenant is disabled, you must provide this notice in a form that's accessible to them. So say, for instance, that you have a tenant who is blind, you can't just mail them a letter and say you're good, because they will not be able to read that. So with most evictions you would encounter in non-HCV housing, it's going to have the same reasons for going to an eviction proceeding as your HCV housing. So the most common reasons to evict a tenant are unpaid rent, property damage, harassing neighbors, subletting, unauthorized pets, or illegal activity such as drugs. All of that is the same with HCV tenants, just as it is with non-HCV tenants. And we do have a stat from New America from 2014 to 2016 that the national average eviction rate was only 2.6%. So I say that to emphasize that while evictions certainly do happen, they are not terribly common. So Same goes with HCV tenants as non-HCV. So I would say that the biggest difference for Section 8 tenants in evicting them is the possibility of an even more emotional eviction process than usual. These tenants typically have nowhere else to go. That's why they're part of the HCV program to begin with. So evictions are never fun, but Section 8 evictions can be especially harrowing.
Mhm.
Okay, and our last frequently asked question before we open it up to discussion. If I accept one HCV tenant, do I have to dedicate all my units to HCV tenants? No, you are not obligated to rent to other HCV tenants. If you do decide to rent to multiple HCV tenants, be sure not to steer them toward a specific location. So by this, we mean if you have a multifamily property, say you have multiple floors of rental units, you can't say, yes, all my HCV tenants are floor 3. I'm just going to shove them all on floor 3. That is called steering. That is definitely a violation of fair housing laws. You cannot do that. So if you are open to taking HCV tenants, then you have to allow them to have access to any of your units.
Absolutely. Well, Jonathan, thank you for going through all of those frequently asked questions. Guys, we pulled those from the responses you provided. So thank you so much for participating there. We're now going to open up the floor for a discussion. So we have a couple of fantastic panelists here to help us today. Gurpreet GP Singh has had a passion for real estate since childhood. He's been helping with his father's residential real estate portfolio and his grandfather's commercial real estate for years. And he's personally been investing in real estate directly for almost 20 years, including residential, retail, office, and even industrial recently. Over the years, he's had direct experience with Section 8 and Section 8 vouchers in Montgomery County, Maryland. And we also have TurboTenant's excellent paralegal, Jean Sanford, in the chat today. I will say, though, please note, we are not going to give you legal advice, and we highly, highly recommend that you seek out information from your local PHA for program details in your area. That said, we are excited to chat with you about Section 8 housing.
And Krista, I do see Corey has also joined us, Corey Ruppersberger.
That's fantastic. Okay, Corey Ruppersberger is another heavy hitter. He founded Best Choice Loan in 2014, and he acts as their president, helping his clients reach their financial goals through a consultative approach. He brings over 25 years of experience in the mortgage and banking industry to the table today.
Awesome. All right, well, welcome Gurpreet, Corey, and Jean. So we have a very lively chat. Let's see if we can flow through here. Any of our panelists, have you guys been watching the chat? Have you seen any questions you especially want to get to?
I see one, if I might jump in. David Balua asked, can you rent to a family member and use Section 8? Great question. No, you cannot have a family member or anyone you're related to as a Section 8 tenant. So that is a big no-no in the program. Okay. GP, I'm curious if you could speak to your experience with Section 8 tenants, whether or not there are undue difficulties or how you've moved past those in your personal experience.
Yes, absolutely. So I think that there definitely is a stigma. People have an unfair bias against them. And I have personally experienced good and bad situations where, maybe a property was very well taken care of and the portion of rent that they owed was paid on time. I believe one of the properties we have was rented for 14 years and it was pretty well taken care of and was paid on time. I've had others which we had to evict and we had $10,000 of damage within a year or two. So it kind of goes both ways. But that's true of, I think, all of our tenants. I think the big key point here is I think they're very similar to regular tenants. And what you're really getting is that guaranteed monthly income once it starts. Like, the rent's going to show up on time as opposed to a month late or 2 days late or 9 days late or whatever, that kind of thing. And so that's good. And so what we've done is we've kind of mixed our portfolio where some of our properties are Section 8, some of them aren't. So we know some of them are coming in and some of them we can take a little more risk, and it's fine that we use non-Section 8 tenants.
Fantastic. All right.
We've got,
Um,
we've got a few people who have asked the same question, which is how about not renewing a contract? And by that, I think they're asking not renewing a Section 8 lease.
I think you have it's totally within your rights. You know, you can choose any tenant you want at renewal time. You can give them notice and find another tenant if you're not happy with them, just like you would with any regular tenant. And we've done that in the past.
great answer. Yeah, there is.
As long as the lease is over, right? If it's a 2-year lease, you got to be obligated. As long as that lease is fully over, I think there's no problem with it.
Absolutely. Well said. Someone asked a similar question, saying, hey, what if my property has deficiencies, but I don't want to fix them? Well, then you can opt to not join the program. They will want you to make sure that any deficiencies are fixed. I also saw someone else ask about the sanitary component and saying, does that mean that tenants don't have to clean up after themselves? Not at all. What the inspector is looking for regarding the sanitary component is making sure that your property is sanitary, that there aren't, again, like raw sewage bubbling up underneath the floors, that it's a safe and clean space for people to live.
In our local area on the deficiency issue, we have had, not very common, but have had in the past where the PHA will withhold the rent payment until that next inspection occurs and the repairs are actually performed. So they can delay the rent payments if they've done an annual inspection and they want you to perform a particular repair.
That's great to know.
We had one person ask, how do you verify the validity of their voucher?
You can call the PHA. And there's also some paperwork that has to be processed. And so, it's it'll come out pretty quick, I think. We haven't had a problem with fraud there, to be honest.
That's great. All right. Corey, I know you have some diverse experience with how Section 8 could be applied. I see a couple questions in the chat about builder programs, but I know specifically you told me about Section 8 being applied to home ownership. Could you speak to that?
Yes, thank you. One of the things that our company does with investors is we try to develop a plan where we can work with your tenant's credit, building towards home ownership, which is a win-win for everyone involved. So maybe it's 2 years of a rental and with a goal to have that tenant to eventually purchase the house from the investor or the landlord. And that's one of the things that we've been trying to build, not just with Section 8, with tenants in general. And there's a lot of benefits because being able to sell the house to your tenant gives you an opportunity to sell the property to someone who you've built a relationship with. You don't have to use real estate agents, pay real estate commissions. It's an avenue that you can help them with getting into the property and purchasing the property from you. And when it comes to Section 8, there's a very not as well-known program called the Section 8 Homeownership Program. And that it varies where you are. Some states and some counties don't have the funds for it, but depending on where you are, there is the ability for a tenant to use their voucher towards home ownership and have that voucher go towards a mortgage. So it's an interesting program, and we're trying to build it and really taking an approach where our company is a for-profit company, but we like to get involved in areas that also have a win-win, let's say, cause investing for everyone involved. So if anyone's interested in learning more about it, it's something that I'd be happy to offer information on. It's probably worth the whole seminar on its own. So thanks again for having me.
Fantastic. Thank you for being here. Okay.
Awesome.
I saw somebody ask about VASH. Let me find it again. I believe it was Mr. Turner. So how do VASH, veteran vouchers, and SRO, single room occupancy, work? It's a great question. So my understanding with the veteran vouchers is that there are around 75,000 housing vouchers that are set aside for veterans specifically. Regarding single room occupancy, you can absolutely rent out a single room and accept Section 8 vouchers, excuse me, there are just going to be additional requirements that space has to fulfill, right? So as we mentioned earlier, it's going to be things like, does the tenant have direct access to that room without going through someone else's bedroom? Is there a safe fire exit? Do they have multiple ways of exiting? But we have provided links in the deck, which you'll be emailed afterwards, so that you can look over all of the special requirements for unique properties.
Okay, we had a good question from Brian, who said, is there concern with Section 8 not honoring current market rental rates with the huge increases in rents that have been taking place in the past few years? And then he said, reading about how certain markets, i.e. Phoenix and Atlanta, where rents have skyrocketed recently.
That's a great question. GP, do you have any experience with like the market rent increasing, and what was your take as the Section 8 landlord? Were you able to increase after the lease was up?
Yeah, so we have done several increases in the past, maybe not every year, but we have. I wouldn't say they're like, right now there's a wild market out there with rent. Maybe rents have gone up like 20% or 30% in some cases. We've never received an increase like that, but we were also never in a market like that. Sure. But we have received regular increases. I think we do have to request them. We got to follow the process and the paperwork, and we have to notify them well in advance. So if you're on top of that, I think it's definitely possible. One way to optimize on that I've seen in our market is there's tables. There's sort of tables based on bedrooms and housing type for our area. And so you can optimize by, turning a 3-bedroom into a 4, or things like that, where, it'll just kind of pop the rent up, and depending on the neighborhood, you can optimize it. It could be better than even theoretically market rent, because I think they have these pre-established tables in our market that I've used in the past that I thought sometimes are more favorable for the investor actually, but it depends.
Fantastic. Okay. I saw a question that would be really great for us to answer from Steve. Are you paid back for the 2-month wait for the first voucher, or does it start with the one that you receive? So GP, I don't know. Was your first payment delayed?
It's bigger. It was, and it's bigger. You get the money. You just get a larger chunk at once.
Gotcha. That is good to hear.
And after that waiting period, the checks are pretty consistent, right?
They're regular. Yes, they're regular every month. The only thing that's going to stop them is an inspection that doesn't occur, or repairs that need to be performed as a result of an inspection. Otherwise, we're going to keep going.
Fantastic. Okay. All right. I want to be cognizant of the time. However, I do see a couple folks in the chat asking for Corey's contact information. So Corey, if you have a website or anything you'd like to drop in there, please do. Alternatively, I could drop in bestchoiceloan.com/Corey if you'd like.
Actually, yes, it's actually bestloanchoice.com, but that's okay.
Yeah,
that's okay. I know people get that, but yeah, bestloanchoice.com, and actually email sometimes, CORY@bestloanchoice.com would be the best too. If you have a scenario you'd like to go over with me.
Fantastic. And GP, would you like me to drop your LinkedIn link in the chat just in case folks want to chat with you?
That'll be fine.
Okay. No pressure. You could tell me no in front of all these folks and I will not do it.
No, it's perfectly fine.
Wonderful. All right. I will get that in there as well. Okay. Are there any good wrap-up questions? One more, because I know we're about at time.
Some people have asked about tax incentives, or how offering Section 8 housing will factor on your taxes that you file. Don't know if anybody can give some insight on that.
I mean, we've been doing taxes every year. We had a rental property, and I can say that I don't think there's any special items from the this program that really makes changes to your taxes. I mean, you got your depreciation, you've got all your standard items, you can do all your repairs, you can deduct everything. I don't think there's any specific tax incentive that I've heard of in our area that we can take advantage of by being part of Section 8.
Excellent.
Good to know.
Good to know.
All right. One last question. Someone's asking about average rent. Just to reiterate, since the amount of rent that you're allowed to charge is based on fair market value, the average rent that Section 8 tenants pay is going to be the same, or at least I should say this, the average amount of rent that you receive is going to be the same as what you would receive from a non-Housing Choice Voucher tenant. So just keep that in mind. Okay. Otherwise, I want to let you guys go, be free to have the rest of your day. Thank you so much to our esteemed panelists, GP, Corey, and Jean, our emotional support paralegal. Jonathan, your time has been valuable as well. We will go ahead and send you out the recording and deck after this presentation. So keep an eye on your inbox tomorrow. We'll have another webinar next month. And there is going to be a survey at the end of this if you'd like to vote on the topic for that next webinar. So thank you guys all so much. It's a pleasure to chat with you. Have a great rest of your day.